Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to be going over all of the assignment 1 assemblies that you need to make, and those are all located in folder number 1, bases and posts. So we already covered base 1, and that basically was that square post sitting on top of the red base with a couple of offset flush constraints. So if you're confused on what that needs to look like when it's completed, go ahead and watch the video on mate and flush, and that'll give you an idea of what that's going to look like at the end. For the second part of this assignment, we're going to we are going to place base 2 into an assembly. This is going to be its totally new assembly file. Then we're also going to place post. It's the same square post file. And that is going to go off on the side. Now, when we start to place and constrain parts, the way I like to think about this is, if I had these parts in my hand, how would I put them together? And so what you would probably do is line up this post over this square hole and then drop it down and in. And we can't do that in one motion like we would if we had the parts in our hand, but it kind of gets our mind thinking about how am I going to constrain this. So let's do some constraints, and let's do a flush constraint. And we're going to put that between this face and this face and hit apply. And we are also going to flush between this face and this face. Now, if I look at my top view, my post is not where I want it to be. So let's go ahead and undo that and take a look at why that's the case. So this flush, go back here. Oh, that's why. That flush should actually be a mate. Excellent. So let's go ahead and edit that constraint, and then we're going to switch our solution from a flush to a mate, and then hit OK. So this is a classic example, and I did not do that on purpose, but this is a classic example of the computer isn't doing what I wanted it to do, but it did exactly what I told it to do. So computers can only do what you tell it to do, right? So stop, think, what happened, and then try to come up with the result. Worst case, you can undo that constraint. But let's go ahead and drag our part down. And so since we're constrained to this face, let's try the same thing, but with this face, with a mate. And we'll see how that goes. That's perfect. Now, I want to set this post into the bottom of the square hole. To do that, I'm going to drag this up, and I'm going to throw one more constraint on, which will be a mate, between the bottom of the pocket and the bottom of the post, and that should have this fully constrained. And it does. So that's good. We're done with this one. Go ahead and save it and start a new assembly. I'm just going to delete the parts and move on from here. So I'm going to give you a pause real quick. If you want to go ahead and pause the video, complete that work, and then restart it, start a new assembly, and then we'll start with the next part. Okay, so for the next part, we're going to place base 3, and you'll notice that base 3 is 3 additional square pockets. So let's go ahead and place post, and we can place post 4 different times. And then I can constrain, and I'm going to go through this relatively quickly because I just covered the same concepts in our last video, but I can go ahead and constrain this, flush it up with some mates here, and then I can put a mate between this face and this face. And just remember, if your part is too close, there's too close of a gap, just drag it off and then go ahead and pick your selection. So we're going to hit apply and then home. So this is now done, fully constrained, and we're ready to go. I just have to put 3 more posts in and do 3 more sets of constraints. Now that doesn't seem to be very time efficient here. So what we're actually going to do is delete these other posts, and we're going to do a rectangular pattern. So here I've got pattern, and it's asking me first thing, component. Remember with dialog boxes, start at the top, work your way down, Start at the left, work your way to the right. So here it's asking for component. That component is post 4. I recommend picking out of the model tree. We're going to go rectangular, and we are going to select our column. So column can be either direction, so I'm going to pick an edge, and notice the arrow is pointing opposite the direction I want to go. Not a problem. We're going to pick that. We're going to flip our direction, and we can see here that we've got a quantity of 2 unitless because quantities don't have a unit to them. And then here my spacing is 2 inches. I'm going to change that to 3, and that is good. I'm then going to go to row. I'm going to pick an opposing edge. That one is going the right direction. Change my spacing to 3 as well, and we can hit OK. Now post is gone, and it's consumed by our component pattern. So they're still in here. They've just been consumed by this, so it kind of organizes your model tree for you when you do that as well. That is going to conclude our video for this topic. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to delete these, and we're going to place our next base, and that is base 4, and it's got the 3 round holes in it. And so then we're going to place our 3 different rods. So I've got rod 175, which these file names are associated with the diameter, rod 2, and rod. And again, what kind of a constraint should we think when we see circular solids? And the answer to that is insert. So we're going to pick the circle here and the bottom circle of the 3 posts, and we're going to stay in the command and just click them all real quick. This is nice and easy. We're going to put those in there. Now, one thing that we have talked about is that Inventor will allow us to have 2 solids occupy the same space. Again, physically we know that's not possible in the real world. In our virtual environment, completely possible. So what we need to do is we need to inspect our model to make sure that it doesn't have what we call interference. Inspect, analyze interference. Don't worry about set 1 and set 2. Just pick everything in a window. So hold down your left mouse button and move over everything. We've got all 4 of our parts in our model tree highlighted, and we're going to hit OK. And now the red base kind of throws things off, so I'm going to change my display to wireframe. And I can see that I get an error message that pops up. It says a total of 1 interference with a volume of 0.417 cubic inches. And it gives me a nice little red ring that shows me where exactly that interference is. There's no interference here. There's none here. Otherwise, I would see red. But there is some here. So now we need to do a little bit of detective work. So let's go ahead and let's first start off by taking rod 2, because we know that's our problem, and we're going to suppress this constraint. And what that will allow me to do is take this and drag it out. We'll go back to shaded with edges so that I can see my 2 parts more easily. I'm going to use my measure tool. That is also under inspect. I would add this to quick access. I use it all the time in parts and in assemblies. So that puts it up here all the time. Side note, when you add things to the quick access toolbar for one mode, such as part mode, when you're making an IPT file, it will not carry over to an assembly. So you have to do that. But if it's your own computer, that will hold from file to file once you set it. So let's go ahead and measure. And we're going to pick our circle and see that that's got a, that's not what I wanted. It's got a diameter of 2 inches. And rod 2 is next, so we're going to close this, go back up, and pick our circle. And I've got a 2 1/4 inch diameter. So if my file name is correct and my base is correct, then I know that I need to change my post. So how do I do that working in an assembly? Well, there's an easy way to do it, And basically what you're going to do is you're going to double click the rod, and then this should look really familiar. We're back into part mode with the exception of our return button here. And return brings us back into our assembly mode. So we're going to go to the sketch for extrusion 1. We're going to change our diameter to 2. We're going to finish sketch. Now we're still in part mode. You can see that everything is grayed out except for rod 2. I want to return back to my assembly. Now everything's ungrayed. And I'm going to right click my insert constraint and unsuppress it. That will snap it back to where it needs to be, and it will only let me rotate it now. Back to analyze interference, and we're going to run our interference check again. And this time it should say no interferences detected. This is what you're going for when you're working with an assembly. That is going to conclude this video on the assembly assignment number 1. The next video we're going to cover our next assignment for assemblies. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next video.